Hello and welcome to The Divide. Thank you so much for being with us. A lot to get to today. By now, I'm sure you've heard of the state Supreme Court's highly controversial ruling that tossed out Washington's felony drug possession law. Our Hannah Kim reports the ruling could have life or death consequences.
It's hard to find memories like this when Matthew Dennis is smiling.
He was fighting opiate addiction for 23 years.
Mom Rose Dennis says Matthew got hooked at a young age, all because he was treated with opioids while battling cancer. The gripping addiction eventually leads Matthew to chase drugs on the streets, living in tents across Seattle for most of his adult life.
He still had a life to live, and he had so much to offer, and this was taken away from him way too soon. And no parent should have to lose a child. And losing a child under these circumstances is just horrible. It's heartbreaking.
Matthew used heroin up until he died this past January. Rose says doctors told her that her 35-year-old son died from kidney failure due to drug use.
I miss him. I will never see him again. And I did everything I could, my husband and I, to try to fix this problem. The triggers were there and the drug dealers were available.
Rose says it was shockingly easy for her son to obtain any and all drugs. She is very worried about the state Supreme Court's decision that now legalizes simple possession in Washington state.
I think it's just opening up the door for people to sell drugs. And the idea that drug dealers can just walk in the door and walk right back out is not helping our society. And you're going to see more people putting up tents and living on the sidewalks in Seattle.
She says addicts need treatment, not jail, but she is concerned that drug dealers will game the new system and make it harder for law enforcement and prosecutors to go after them.
We don't want people to think that we're going to give up on drug dealers. We're not. We're absolutely not going to stop prosecuting drug dealers.
But the King County Prosecutor's Office admits in some cases it may be harder to prove intent to sell. And because the courts left it open-ended, prosecutors are still hazy on the amount of hard drugs that is acceptable under the ruling.
We're still trying to figure it out.
As they navigate this new world, the King County Prosecutor's Office is also bracing for more overdoses.
The fentanyl problem is remarkable. It really is frightening.
Everything was taken away from him.
For this mother, the daily war against addiction is over, but only because it took her son's life.
I loved his hugs. I loved his smile. I loved the potential that he had in life that he wasn't able to pursue. He said he loved us and then he was sorry.
In Seattle, Hannah Kim, Q13 News.
Yeah, and it's really hard to even begin to wrap our minds around how profound of an impact this one state Supreme Court ruling is going to have. And all of the things that Hannah mentioned there in her reporting are on the mind of law enforcement as well. I spoke with Marysville Police Chief Eric Scarpin about how this ruling could impact the progress that that city has made in not only reducing crime, but helping those who are suffering with addiction.
Chief, tell me today in the city of Marysville, if I am stopped with cocaine, let's say, what are one of your officers going to do?
That's a good question. So, in fact, I was on a ride-along with one of my sergeants just yesterday, and we came across a car that was parked off to the side of the road, directly next to State Avenue, but also right on a road that has access to the railroad tracks in town. The woman was smoking meth in the car. And it's just right out there in public. And when the sergeant contacted her, her response was, "Isn't this all legal now?" Well, it's complicated, right? Yes and no. The Supreme Court's decision did allow for the personal possession of controlled substances, but there are many other crimes that are associated with substance abuse and substance use that are still legally valid within the state.
So what are those, and will you be pursuing them? What is the gray area?
Yeah, definitely. So like in this particular situation that I gave you, there was a trespassing offense that was at hand because it was on the railroad property. There's drug paraphernalia that was in the vehicle and readily accessible and visible to the officer that would call for their enforcement action. And frankly, the importance of these drug crimes aren't for us to merely cite people and put them in jail. That's not why we're using these things as enforcement tools. We've been leading with compassion here in Marysville. We've had a dedicated mental health professional program that's worked with our offenders who violate the drug code and try to get them into treatment and try to get them into housing. The woman that we contacted yesterday was homeless, living out of her car, but unfortunately, she's refusing services. And that makes it really, really difficult for us to balance being able to be compassionate with somebody and try to get them into resources and being able to get them to where, there has to be some kind of consequence, right? This is somebody who could, in an instant, be out on the roadway and then be driving under the influence of methamphetamines.
Just for the edification of our viewers, what did you do with the meth that she had?
So it's still contraband under federal law and under state law, and that's the direction that we've been receiving from both our local prosecutors and our county prosecutors, so that our officers will still seize that as contraband. It's not legal to retain that, essentially, even though we are not charging it as a crime. There's a lot of unknown factors here as this decision plays out. There's impacts to our narcotic canine programs and how those dogs are used for enforcement. And there are still drug crimes that are clearly still drug crimes, things like intent to deliver, intent to distribute, people who are selling drugs. Our officers are still enforcing those laws and will still continue to serve search warrants when we have evidence that drugs are being sold.
That being said, one of the key aspects of this that is just kind of unknown is what is the threshold? What does it mean to have personal possession versus, possession with intent? And drug dealers, I'll give them credit. They can get very creative and be very smart about how they try to get away with things. Do you see it being difficult to prove possession with intent versus personal possession?
I think in some cases it's going to be very, very clear, right? The evidence is going to be there that this is somebody who is intending to sell. Other times, I think you're right. People are going to get very creative here with how they transport and how they retain drugs so that they can use this essentially as a loophole to continue to sell drugs. Frankly, the greater concern here is that we know that our drug crime in Washington state spurs the huge spike in property crime that we've seen over the many, many years here in many of our jurisdictions. When somebody has $1,000 a day drug habit and they're unemployed and they have no way to support that, we know that they turn to crime in order to support that drug habit.
And to that point, I was shocked to see this, and I've got it up right now. We've been doing a lot of stories about how crime is up during the pandemic. In some places to record levels. I saw the city of Marysville put out a stat that crime is down there 21% compared to 2019. Am I reading that wrong? Is there a fine print in that, or explain that to me?
No, and the city's done a phenomenal job. It's been city, community, the police officers here, our elected officials. They've all worked together from multiple angles to help drive both the violent crime rate down, which is actually down 60% from 2016, to just our general crime rate, which is down nearly 40% from that same time range. And you're right, last year we experienced nearly a 20% drop in just general crime within the city. That's been through a variety of different efforts. Like I said before, one of the things we've led with is compassion with our mental health professional program. Through that program, we've gotten 72 people through detox, through drug detox, and we've helped 211 people obtain housing through that program once they have successfully graduated the program. And we know that for every person that we help get through a detox treatment program, and that we also help obtain some permanent housing, that's one less person that's out on the street potentially committing crimes to support a drug habit. And we know that this is a valuable program. That's definitely been one of the keys to our success here in town.
So how worried are you that the state Supreme Court decision is going to get the trajectory of crime in Marysville on the wrong path?
Yeah, I would call myself very, very, very concerned because one of the first major crimes that occurred as I came to this jurisdiction just in September of 2020, we had a homicide during that fall, and that was a drug-related crime. That was, it's a case that's still under investigation and still under prosecution, so I don't want to talk too openly about it. But I know that these are the kinds of things that do drive violent crime in our community. When I speak with our police officers, that's one of their main concerns with this change is that it was sudden, it doesn't have any phased implementation, it doesn't have any provisions for helping people get into treatment. It's merely just a hard stop. We know that the legislature was considering some similar measures, ultimately shelving that bill this session. We know it's a complicated issue, but a hard stop doesn't feel like the right way to move forward on this.
Yeah, and you talked a lot about compassion. I think this is a place where we can all agree. You know, just the simple act of throwing someone in jail because they're a drug abuser probably isn't going to do it on their own. But that being said, do you believe that consequences can be an avenue toward recovery?
Most definitely, and we've seen it here in town. So one of the things that our social worker does is visit inmates in jail who are in on drug-related charges. We continue to offer services once we've already offered the consequence if they've refused those services up front. We have a lot of people take us up on that and a lot of success stories. In our most recent State of the City address, when Mayor Nairn was speaking about the things that were going on in Marysville, we had people chiming in on that call, thanking the city, thanking the mayor, thanking the police department for all the efforts that we have in this area. And those are people who have made themselves available of those services. I just haven't seen that happening other places. It's really phenomenal.
So do you think when you are gonna have more people probably say no to services because there is no flip side consequence?
Yeah, and the example that I led off with, and where we contacted the woman yesterday, her response was, "This is all legal now, and no, I don't want your resources." That really puts us in a difficult place as a community, because this is a community that said we don't want people out on our streets using drugs. We don't want people behind the wheel who are intoxicated under dangerous drugs and can potentially put the entire community at harm. So it really puts us in a difficult position to be able to keep our community safe.
Yeah, and I think what's frustrating here is you have a city that's kind of bucking the trend of what we're seeing elsewhere. They've been able to reduce crime. They've set up programs that are getting people off the streets into services and moving on with their life. And then to see a decision like this, one ruling that risks undermining that, I can't imagine how frustrating it is. And really quickly, I know a lot of people want to blame the state Supreme Court on this. And for the debacle that has resulted. But state lawmakers knew there was a potential problem with the way that the state's felony drug possession law was written. They knew it for years. They didn't do anything about it. Now this is really their mess to pick up. But a lot of other people are dealing with the consequences of it as well. All right, coming up, a lot of folks jumping into the race for Seattle mayor. I don't know who'd want that job, but apparently there's a few. Can any of them, though, save a once thriving city? We discuss also why the governor shouldn't be so quick to turn down ideas, even ones he might not like. Stick around. We've seen several people now jump into the race for Seattle mayor. Good luck to all of them, including most recently former Seattle Supersonic James Donaldson.
I can't sit idly by and let the same old continue to take us down this path that we're going by. We can do so much better. We've been so much better. I've been here for 40 years.
Donaldson says his campaign is aimed at using compassion and innovation to address issues like homelessness and to rebuild trust in law enforcement. And I should note, we do hope to have Mr. Donaldson on the show next week. But first, another candidate has also emerged in the race, hoping to use his experience in economic development and government to get City Hall functioning again. Lance Randall is positioning himself as a business-friendly candidate who will do what it takes to address the crises that have gotten out of control.
You can't differentiate between big and small businesses. They're all valuable. So I've helped large businesses and small businesses and nonprofits, all types of businesses. And I think the first thing we have to do is acknowledge that all businesses are important, no matter what their size is. And we must do what we can as a municipality to make sure that we have a business climate they can thrive in. Now, we must bring the businesses in, big and small, into any conversation where we're talking about creating a policy that may impact them. By doing that, you're able to find a middle ground when you're trying to accomplish something. The other thing that we must do is you have to be more responsive to the needs of the businesses. When they say that they are concerned about crime, we need to address it. It seems to me we're more concerned about trying to help those individuals who are committing the crimes because they may be committing the crimes because of a drug addiction or what have you. I get that. But in still dealing with those issues that they're trying to deal with, we still have to take care of the businesses and make sure that their property is protected and that their employees are safe. And just by turning a blind eye to individuals that do commit crimes, arrest them, put them in jail, and let them back out on the streets, that's not accomplishing anything. We have to send a message to people that everyone in this city should be safe, protected, and should be able to go anywhere they want to go to do what the things they need to do, and that we can't allow people to commit atrocities against others, against other people and other businesses. We have to deal with that issue head on. We also have to make sure that our public safety delivery system is strong. And what I mean by that, I'm talking about the police department, the fire department, the ambulances, or the EMTs, and the human service providers. Anytime one of those agencies is weakened, the entire public safety delivery system could be in jeopardy, which means that everyone is less safe.
And by weakened, do you mean defunded?
Yes, I mean defunded. While I do understand what that means, I looked at the definition. I appreciate the young people all over the world that marched, bringing this to light. But here's the question that I've had to ask myself. I've been a victim of police harassment, so I know how demeaning it could be. If we defund the police department by whatever amount, 50% or whatever, I'm trying to get an understanding, how would that stop that particular officer or one or two of those types of officers from coming after me if we have not done anything to get them off the force? At the same time, we do have the diversity on the police department, and we have officers who really try to do their job who've never committed an atrocity. So to blanket, to just say we're going to defund the police department, which results in officers leaving, which results in people not wanting to be police officers. We have 783,000 people in this city, and we have an obligation to protect them. And we need so many officers per capita to make sure people are protected.
Mr. Rander, I'll close with this question by heading off what I know will be a criticism. In this city, if you support businesses of any size, if you want a reasoned approach to the homeless crisis, if you don't support defunding the police, you're right wing. What would you say to people who are going to try to label you a NIMBY or right wing or just not suited for progressive Seattle?
I would say to them, I'm not a right wing person. I'm a Democrat, lifelong Democrat. I come from a family of successful business people, small business people, and civil rights leaders. So I know what it means to look out for the least of us, to look out for the rights of everyone. But I also understand what it means to have a business, because I have a small business myself. And I understand from an economic development perspective, the importance of business and government working hand in hand to make sure that the economy is strong for everybody. Everyone benefits when all businesses, large and small, are successful, and you have to have a government that understands that. I just believe that we have to adhere to the laws that are on the books. Everyone has to, and I think that we have to be mindful when we make decisions to make sure that when we make these decisions, that it's going to benefit everybody and not just a certain segment of the population. And I'm very strong about equity. This is how you create equity. Everybody needs the same protection. Everybody needs the same respect. And we just have to do a better job at doing that. So if people want to call me that, that's fine. But I can tell you right now, I'm not tied to any clique that one way or another, right or left. I'm a problem solver. That is what I'm known for. Looking at a situation, finding out what the problem is, and trying to figure out how to resolve it. We have a lot of problems, a lot of challenges that we have to face. And I'm ready to step up to meet the challenge to lead a city in such a way where we're going to come together and solve our problems and our challenges. But we have to come together under understanding that we have to support one another, respect one another, and abide by the laws that are on the books.
I'm not tied to any clique, he said. I told him I was going to steal that as a catchphrase to our show because we're not tied to any clique either. As you can tell, Mr. Randall, he doesn't speak in bumper stickers. It was a lengthy conversation. We spoke for about a half hour about the issues facing the city. If you're interested in that conversation, please do download and subscribe to the Divide podcast, and that will be posted on Monday. All right, coming up after the break, is no idea better than a bad idea? We discuss the state's path toward reopening. Stick around. It's been a few weeks now since the entire state moved into phase 2 of the governor's reopening plan, and I'll say it's been nice to get businesses back going a little bit, but we still don't know what the next phase is going to look like, what we have to do to get there, or how long before it comes. Governor Inslee has said that he doesn't want to set the parameters for phase 3 prematurely, and he wants to have more information at hand before we move forward. But instead of waiting, Republicans in Olympia decided that they were going to present a plan of their own. They called it Open Safe, Open Now. It would move us into phase 3, which would be a return to K-12 classroom learning under their plan, and it would allow most businesses to reopen at 50%. And then 3 weeks later, should there not be a big spike in cases, we would enter phase 4, a 100% reopening. But the governor's office rejected the plan pretty quickly. The spokesperson for Inslee told KHQ this plan would undoubtedly lead to a rebound in COVID activity. More people would suffer as a result. It is not a serious proposal. To which I would respond, then show us a proposal that is serious. Now, don't get me wrong, the governor is under no obligation to acquiesce to the desires of the minority party. But rejecting an idea is bad when you don't yet have an idea that's better. It's not really helping anyone. It reminded me of when Howard Schultz was floating a run for president, and we challenged him to present solutions to the problems he was railing against. If you run a 5-month campaign of just pointing out things that are wrong, people might be tired of it by the time you actually make a decision.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with that. First of all, we're 18 months away.
Yeah.
18 months, that's a long time. You know, for you to say that to me when the Democratic group of people running for president have embraced something called the Green New Deal as a solution.
What I hear is, you know, if I'm not putting out solutions, it's still better than solutions that aren't realistic. You're saying, let's wait and see what your solutions are.
Let me.
And look, it's quite possible the Republican plan to reopen isn't a good one, and that it would lead to the resurgence of the virus. But it's impossible to say whether the governor's would be better until we see it. Labeling a proposal as non-serious when you've given us no proposal to compare it to doesn't exactly instill confidence. And as for Republicans, what I would have liked to see in their proposal were acknowledgments of where they do agree with the governor and fewer criticisms, frankly, of his approach so far. That's not helpful, and it doesn't exactly endear the governor to your cause. Both sides need to keep in mind that getting the state reopened isn't about what party gets us there. It's about getting us there. People who are struggling couldn't care less who can rack up the most political points along the way. You know, we have around 150 politicians in Olympia. And if we want Washington to be open for business, then every single one of them needs to be open to ideas. All right, thank you so much for joining us on The Divide. And don't forget, if you haven't already, please do download, subscribe, and rate our Divide podcast. We love bringing you extended coverage on there every week, starting Mondays after the show. Until I see you next time, please do something to bridge the divides happening in your own life. I'll see you tomorrow on Q13 News This Morning.